Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me for another Outer Limits review. Today I will be reviewing Season 1, Episode 5, The Sixth Finger, directed by James Goldstone and starring David McCallum, Jill Howarth, and Edward Mulhare. And I have to say, The Sixth Finger is considered a very memorable episode of The Outer Limits, and after watching it, I can see why. This, in my opinion, was easily the best episode of the show so far, and definitely, I think, fair to say, a classic piece of science fiction. My one issue really with this episode is the ending, which some people may love. I found it not to be quite totally satisfactory, but I also don't think it ruins the episode, and I will get more into that as I go through the entire episode. So we start with a girl named Kathy and a Professor Mathers, and we find out that the professor is studying genetics. And we also get to see some things he's done with this monkey who's filing papers and doing some other interesting things throughout the episode. Um, it turns out that the professor caused the monkey to do this, and Kathy says she would like to be smarter as well. So that's pretty much our lead in for the episode. We are then introduced to our main character, Gwillem, I think is how you pronounce his name. And he's in a scene with some others who are kind of picking on Kathy, a couple really annoying characters. And it turns out that you can tell that they care about each other somewhat. So we get another scene with Gwillem and Kathy, and Gwillem talks about how he would like to go somewhere else. He's not really satisfied with the town he lives in, his job, things like that, which makes sense. So Gwillem and Kathy go to visit the professor again. She sells bread, I think it is. And Gwillem decides he wants to be the professor's assistant. So he talks to him about it. We learn that the professor is using a process to speed up human evolution, and Gwillem volunteers to help him with this. So at this point, we get a description of what the professor's trying to accomplish. It was a little exposition type scene, but it was fine. It made sense. So Gwillem agrees to go through this process, which may or may not be a good idea. I still wasn't sure at this point. So he goes into this machine. It's kind of a strange looking machine. And when he steps out, he's very changed physically and probably more importantly, mentally. And the professor explains the changes, including later on, Gwillem will get a sixth finger, which is the title of the episode, which makes sense. But you can tell Gwillem is already thinking about power and nothing else at this point, which could lead to trouble. So Kathy wants to go visit Gwillem. He's not too interested. He just wants to keep reading his books. You can tell he's only interested in gaining more knowledge at this point. So at this point, Kathy, we get another scene with her chatting with these two people, Gert and Wilt, who are really annoying. They're the same two from earlier in the episode that were giving her a hard time. And she gets mad at them at this point, and I was totally on Kathy's side. I have to say, I'm not really sure why these two characters are in the episode, but they didn't detract from it, so whatever. At this point, Gwillem is becoming a great piano player. It was pretty impressive, actually. He also has this chat with the professor about creative energy and some other things, which was interesting enough, if a little bit talky. Parts of this episode might be a little bit too talky, but it's fine overall. So at this point, Gwillem's changing even more. He's really evolving. He says he doesn't need sleep anymore, which is a very interesting concept. The professor would like to stop the process. He's concerned about going on, but you can tell Gwillem's really not interested in stopping at this point. He wants to keep it evolving further and see what will happen. So at this point, we get a scene where Gwillem basically scares the housekeeper who wants to take a peek at what he looks like, what he's been up to. And she's a goner. She falls over. It turns out that she's dead. Gwillem says he caused this. I wasn't 100% clear on how, but if you just go with it, it's fine. You can tell that his powers are getting pretty dangerous if he can cause things like this to happen. You can also tell he doesn't have too much feeling for this lady at this point, and he's kind of almost looking down on humanity because he's more evolved than them, which is kind of an interesting concept. There's a lot of really interesting philosophies and concepts kind of throughout this episode. So at this point, Kathy visits Gwillem. He's evolved even more. I have to say the effects are pretty great in this episode. I was really impressed. So Kathy initially gets scared when she sees Gwillem. We'll find out that that'll change in time. I think she was probably just shocked. She also tells the professor she wants to change him back. But after we get some more philosophy from Gwillem, he talks about how he needs to destroy the town and, kind of show his superior mental skills, I guess, to everyone else. So Gwillem does go to visit the town, but he has a change of heart with the professor, hot on his trail. He goes to see Kathy again and says that he's evolved past a place where he's worried about revenge or power or anything else, which is a really, really interesting concept that I actually wish the episode would have explored a little further. So at this point, Golem asks Kathy for her help. He says he wants to go back into the machine and have her push it forward so he can evolve even further. But kind of predictably, Kathy instead pushes the machine backward, and then we get these really, really cool and pretty impressive special effects for 1960s TV, where Gwillem's going through different stages of evolving and I guess devolving. I'm not really sure if that's the right word or not, but he's kind of going back and forth. Looks like he's almost becoming a caveman. So it seems like Kathy's maybe pushed back on the machine a little bit too much, but then she kind of balances it out so it's in the middle. And it looks like Gwillem is back to his normal state, at least physically. I'm not really sure about mentally. The episode kind of leaves it open-ended. At least that was my impression on exactly what Gwillem's mental state here is at the end, even though Kathy seems to be satisfied with how things went. So like I said, to me, this episode was a little bit of a disappointment. He just goes back to how he looked, and we don't really know exactly what happened. Others might find this to their satisfaction, but I felt like there was a lot of potential to go a couple different ways that would have been more interesting with this ending. But the episode overall is still memorable, and I have to say the acting is really, really strong overall in this episode. Jill Howarth especially. Her character could have been really a non-factor, but she does a lot without her character being the spotlight. I thought her performance was really excellent here. And overall, I do like all the philosophy of this episode, and it's another one that still has a relatable message today. So all credit to the Six Finger there. A few issues, as I said, I already talked about the ending. I also think the episode is slightly too talky in some places. It's like you could show us what's happening. You don't need to narrate and explain everything. But again, that can somewhat be forgiven being a 1960s TV show. Overall, I think the Six Finger is a very successful episode, and I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, and I strongly recommend this episode for fans of classic science fiction and The Outer Limits. So 4 out of 5 for the Six Finger. And as always, thank you very much for watching.